So welcome everybody. Thank you for coming, and I'm delighted to welcome Michael Dowd and all of you. And I'm especially delighted because this is the first in a series of conversations that we're recording on behalf of Heart Community Group. And the kind of title of the whole series is Living Well Now. And I'm especially pleased that Michael is the first of these conversations. And we've got a whole host of them which you can see on our website coming up over the next 3 or 4 weeks. So yeah, really looking forward to this. So thank you, Michael, for coming along.
Oh, my delight, Kimberley. Looking forward to this.
Great. So for those of you that don't know, Michael is the creator of postdoom.com. And we'll put that in the chat later so you can go and check it out if you're not familiar with Michael's work. I found it an absolute treasure trove of nourishment and wisdom and resources and information over the past few years. Could you start, Michael, just by telling us what you mean by post-doom?
Sure. Connie and I were doing a series of programs in Canada, and we spent the better part of an afternoon with Paul Beckwith and Paul Chafurka, both sort of elders or leaders in this sort of collapse, overshoot, abrupt climate change, potentially extinction sort of world. And we floated this idea of a post-doom conversation series. And they were both like, wow, that's great. And by post-doom, what I mean is somebody who gets the bad news, including the potential of near-term extinction, and certainly a trimming down of human population, at least 90% in the near future. And has done the grief work, the heart work, and then come through to a place of inspired local action, to a place of relative equanimity, to a place of generous, compassionate contribution to their neighbors, their friends, their family, and that sort of thing. So it's the opposite of doom and gloom. It's the opposite of giving up. It's actually more active, but instead of activism that's often still fear-driven and often make wrong, love and action. I call it love and action. It's where does love motivate you to be in action, to be a blessing to others in your community at whatever scale you can. And so I've had 80 of these post-doom, or 79 post-doom conversations over a period of a couple of years. And then I've also been adding resources to the post-doom. There's only 3 main pages on the post-doom website. One of them is the conversations page, which has all 80 of these people that I've had conversations with, and I continue to have a few more. And then there's the resource page, which is like a clearinghouse of the best blogs and videos and audios and podcasts and just all kinds of stuff. And then most recently, the post-doom discussion page, which is, we have these weekly, actually twice a week, post-doom no gloom Zoom calls, where there's 25 to 40 people, usually 25 to 35 people, every Wednesday night. Well, this is my time, so it'll be different for you, but every Wednesday night Eastern time and every Saturday afternoon Eastern time. And we just share. It started out to be at 90 minutes, and they're now more often than not 2 hours. I just had one last night, and it's where we can be authentic, because a lot of us, as you all, I suspect, know, live in like 2 or 3 worlds. Like, we can be authentic and real and vulnerable in certain contexts, but God help us, should we be authentic and real in another context, because it freaks people out. And that's not just the people in denial, but also the people who are still utterly and totally in activism mode and genuinely believe that if we just convert enough politicians or get enough people to vote the right way, or to, switch to, vegan, or stop flying or driving, or, all the other really important and good personal behavior things that make a difference in our lives, but aren't going to transform the system. And so this post-doom no gloom world is now where I imagine sort of, I see myself as a post-doom pastor or post-doom chaplain, and I love it. I'm absolutely loving it. So
brilliant. Thank you so much. And you often talk about, I've heard you talk about this WASF doorway, and can you talk a bit about that and the gifts that you see potentially on the other side of that doorway?
Yeah, well, this would actually, I wasn't planning on doing this, but let me screen share and just actually go share with you all. Oh, I don't want a whiteboard. I want my, here we go. Because I'm going to give you the definitions of doom and post-doom. I have them listed in 2 different places on the post-doom website. I don't know where, oh, there we go. Okay. So can you all see that?
No, not yet, Michael.
Hold on, let me make this. Okay, let me try again. Okay, can you all see that? The post-doom, this is the homepage?
Maybe if you stop sharing and then try and share again.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, let me stop sharing. And then go down here to screen share. And I don't want whiteboard, I want that.
There you go.
Okay, so you can see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is the post-doom homepage, and it began as regenerative conversations exploring overshoot, grief, grounding, and gratitude. And on this homepage, we also have the definitions of doom and post-doom. So there are just 3 definitions of doom and 3 definitions of post-doom that get at your question, but also really are foundational for the difference between doom and post-doom. And you find them at both of those pages. So doom, a common feeling of ugh or dread upon realizing that technological progress and economic growth and development are the root of our predicament, not our way out. Doom is a name for the anxiety and fear called forth when living in a corrupt and dysfunctional civilization, causing a mass extinction. And doom is the midpoint between denial and regeneration, with or without us. That's the thing, life regenerates. Even if we go extinct in the next 30 to 50 years, which is absolutely possible, it could be sooner than that. But even if that's the case, life will regenerate. That's what life does. I call it compost theology. And by saying doom is the midpoint between denial and regeneration, with or without us, it's like a lot of people avoid allowing themselves to even feel doom. Because what happens is there's this place called doom, which is the midpoint, and there's a door. And over the top of the door, it says WASF. And we all know what that means. We are so, yeah. But when we allow ourselves to walk through the door and look back, especially when we start really experiencing the benefits, there's like at least 12.5 benefits, really huge benefits relationally and psychologically, spiritually, and everything else, in terms of not just collapse awareness, but collapse acceptance. So it's what Paul Chafurka calls the gift, finding the gift on the other side of the stages of grief, acceptance, finding that gift. And then you turn back and that door still says WASF, but what you're present to more often than not is we are so fortunate. How fortunate it is to be alive today, even with all its pain, even with all its anguish, even with all its suffering, even with the chaos and suffering we see around us. It's a heart tenderizer, and it allows us, unless of course we're struggling for food. I mean, there are the bases of Maslow's hierarchy that, if you or your kids or grandkids are struggling for food or shelter, obviously that's going to be the thing that's you're present to. But assuming that there's at least some level of privilege or some level of basic needs met, then wait, what am I doing? I can't take off yet because I got to get to post-doom. So let me go back. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Yeah, all right, try it again. Okay, so post-doom. What opens up when we remember who we are, that we are part of the universe, we're an expression of life, we're a part of nature, not its masters. So what opens up when we remember who we are, accept the inevitable, honor our grief, and prioritize what is pro-future and soul-nourishing? Post-doom is a fierce and fearless reverence for life and relative equanimity, even in the midst of abrupt climate mayhem, a global pandemic, and collapse of both the health of the biosphere and business as usual. And post-doom is living meaningfully, compassionately, and courageously, no matter what. So that's what my life is now devoted to, is to helping people not avoid doom, but to move through doom as elegantly and compassionately and generously as possible, so that they can spend the rest of their lives, and it's probably going to be shorter than our parents and grandparents lived, but in that post-doom place of, sometimes people say, well, it's too late. Well, no, it's not too late to be a loving person. It's not too late to be a contribution to your community. And that's what Kim's work is about. That's what my work is about. That's what a lot of us in this world are doing now.
Yeah, yeah. I often say to people, it's like everything that's made my life meaningful and continues to do so is still here now, and actually probably will be here if and when collapse happens. So yeah, it's so what can you share with us? And you do so much of this on your website and in your talks, and what does it mean to you to live well now?
Well, thank you, Kim. The first thing I want to say is, what I just shared that you all experience, everybody except Bill, is the most important thing I have to say. So, Bill, you just missed out, but there, what can I say? I love Bill. I love Bill, so that's why I give him a hard time. All right, so remind me of the question again, Kim, because I totally forgot.
Yeah. So you've already said a bit about this, but what can you share about what you've seen on how to live well now, knowing what we know?
Yeah, great question. So just speaking personally, I came to this understanding. I was pretty much, I had an ecological worldview through Thomas Berry and Joanna Macy and deep ecology and bioregionalism and ecofeminism and all that good stuff in the 1980s, 1990s. But around 2000, I read several books that put me on a techno-optimist, unidirectional, sort of more human-centered understanding of things. And it wasn't until December of 2012 that I lost that died. I watched David Roberts' TEDx talk called "Climate Change is Simple," and it just changed my life. So for the last 9 years, I've been spending between 20 and 40 hours a week studying the rise and fall of civilizations, abrupt climate change, which is like 10,000 years of climate change in half a human lifetime, and all this really scary stuff. And I was an ardent activist for a while, because I really believed that we could still transform the systems. And I went through the classic pattern that Paul Trafurka talks about that I'll share a little bit later. And what has made the difference, more than anything else, are several things. One is an expanded sense of identity, what Joanna Macy and others called the greening of the self, or the universalizing of the self, that sense that my self doesn't stop with my skin, that I am like nesting dolls. We are all part of a nested process of divine creativity, and we're part of that. We're not separate from it. We're not superior to it. It is primary reality. It's our biophysical living creator, sustainer, and end that we're part of. So we either live in right relationship to that reality, or we suffer. It's pretty much that simple. So recognizing that myself is not the skin encapsulated ego, the way Alan Watts talked about, that myself is as big as the universe and as big as whatever brought this universe into being. So that expansion of the self, the greening of the self, it's not the denying of the self, it's the expanded to include everything. Reality as a whole is my larger self. And that's my commitment. So that's one thing, is that enlarging of the self. The other is recognizing that death, finality, impermanence, even extinction are necessary. They're no less sacred than life, that death and extinction are an integral part of life. And Connie and I did programs for close to 20 years on a sacred science that is a meaningful, inspiring, evidential approach to mortality and death and impermanence. And so that understanding of the rightness of death at all scales of the universe, from the death of stars to the death of mountains and molecules, you name it, at every level, helps me not only not be afraid, but to genuinely embrace death as an integral part of life. As John Michael Greer says, the opposite of life is not death. The opposite of life is space. Death is an integral part of biological life. You can't have a universe without death. So at any rate, so the expanding of the self is one. The sacredness of endings and mortality and death and even extinctions is another. And I guess I guess the third would be the recognition, and this gets into the realm of benefits, like what has opened up, what's possible by fully accepting collapse and fully accepting the possibility of extinction, and certainly the massive trimming down of human population. One of them, it's reprioritized everything. I mean, I live like I did 12 years ago when I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a tumor the size of my fist in my spleen. And if the chemo hadn't worked, I would have died within 10 months. Fortunately, the chemo worked. But during that period when we didn't know whether it would or not, I had what religious people call the peace that passes understanding. I just had this deep gratitude for the past. And I had done the cleanup work. I had made amends. I had said apologies and to several people, actually quite a few people, but there were several people that all I could say was, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I know what a shit I was. And if I could go back, I would do it differently. Boom, we were both in tears, you know? So that kind of cleaning up the past, making amends, and also expressing gratitude. There were like 45 people that I wrote down on a list, and I reached out to each one of them independently and I thanked them. You know, I never told you what a blessing it was when you did this or when you said that or whatever. I even went to a second grade teacher that I had that was still alive. So at any rate, so expressing gratitude, expressing regret, that cleaning up my life has been possible. So those have been the things: expanded sense of self, the sacredness of death, and then using the awareness of mortality and the fact that that all of us on this call could very well be dead within 10 years. No question. I would actually put it at over 50%. But whether that's the case or not, we're living in the real end times. A lot of people don't recognize, don't appreciate that movie that, you know, Don't Look Up. Connie and I watched it for the 6th time just the night before last, but most people don't get it. And certainly most of the critics didn't get it.
No.
Neil deGrasse Tyson got it. It's a documentary, he said. It's simply telling the truth. This is how our politicians are going to behave and are. This is how the media, this is how all of us in our, you know, and anthropocentrism, that's the name of the meteor, or that's the name of the asteroid that's already hitting us, but it's a slow motion asteroid. But it's anthropocentrism, it's human centeredness, and it's 7,000 years in the making. So we can't stop it. It's going to prove just as unstoppable and nearly as deadly as the comet in that movie. And so I can not only be not freaked out by that, but I can allow that recognition that we are in the real end times, not mythic, not fundamentalist, but we are in these times. And oh my God, what a holy time to be alive. What a sacred time. I'm still conscious. I can still go to the grocery store. I can still put gas in my car. That may not be there 5 years from now, or 2 years from now, or 12 years from now. So living with a sense of how sacred life is, how precious it is, what a gift that I happen to have been born. I won the "where were you born" lottery. I happen to be born in the right place. I'm not suffering. I'm not struggling. I have a lot of privilege. So how am I going to use that privilege to be a contribution and to promote post-doom heart and mind and post-doom living? So anyway, long answer to your question.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you. And let me just pause at this point and say to the rest of the people on the call, if you have questions, by all means, can you start putting them in the chat? Start putting them in the chat, and I'll call on you to ask your question. Or if you don't want to ask it, just put it in the chat and say, can somebody else ask it? That's fine too.
And you can feel free to also, I mean, if this is okay with you, Kim, on my calls, we also did the raise hand. So there's a reaction and you can raise your hand if you want to, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, thinking back to Don't Look Up, the movie, and I've heard you speak before about denial and the inevitability of denial. Can you just talk on that for a couple of minutes? Why is it inevitable that we don't face this, we don't see it? Some of us.
Oh, most of us, yes. Oh, well, actually, this would be a good. I've prepared about 9 slides that I wanted to share. This would be a perfect time because it deals with what's inevitable, including the inevitability of denial for the vast majority. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing and let's see if I can. Okay, so you all are the very, very first people that I am introducing, this is just the beginning. This will actually be a longer program, but what I'm calling 12 Inevitables, Reality 101. Like, this is the essence. If you really want to understand the nature of reality and the nature of our times and what's possible and what's not possible now, I think this stuff is crucial. And it centers around 12 inevitables. So it's contrary to Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired magazine. He wrote a book a few years ago called The Inevitable: Understanding 12 Technological Forces That Will Shape Our Future. Now, I like Kevin. I've been to his house several times. I mean, we're not close friends, but certainly have a deep, warm, collegial, friendship. And yet, here's the core of his book. He says, much of what will happen in the next 30 years is inevitable, driven by technological trends that are already in motion. And I suggest that these 12 trends that I'm sharing here completely override that. What he's suggesting is going to happen between now and 2045 are completely overridden, because what he's focusing on is technological trends. I'm focusing on natural trends, the universe trends. So I suggest that confusion and collective insanity reign without a life-centered, that is an ecocentric, not an anthropocentric, not a human-centered, but a life-centered view of ecology, energy, and history. Enthralled by gee whiz technologies and blind to 12 collapse-related inevitabilities, we stumble into a future of ecological and societal certainties that most people cannot see or will vehemently deny. And so that's really what I focus on in this program, is the 12 collapse-related inevitabilities, and I'll share them just here in a minute. And I suggest that they are ecological and societal certainties. And most people, even though I suggest that they're undeniable, most people will try to deny them. And that's why I created this program. So denial, of course, is the largely unconscious habit of thought whereby we refuse to accept the reality of things that are bad or upsetting, or that challenge our worldview, our legacy, how we live, what is required of us, and or our feelings of self-worth or superiority. Denial is the instinctual impulse to reject or discount information that calls into question our hopes, assumptions, or expectations about the future. Everybody has denial instincts. I do, you do, everybody we know and love, so we can have compassion for each other. Denial gets a bad rap. Denial is often simply adaptive inattention. I love this quote from Stephen Jenkinson. He says, inattention, that's not paying attention to the world's ecological state, is well advised, because attention to it mitigates against your happiness, your contentment, and your sense of well-being. Having a conscience now is a grief-soaked proposition. Whatever spiritual awakening may have meant in past times and places, if you awaken in our time, you awaken with a sob. So here, and I'll just do this and then I take these one at a time in my actual program, but here I'm just going to list them and I'll say a little something about it. So every civilization that prioritizes man over God kills itself. Now, obviously, I'm using the word man as a personification of humanity. Okay, that's why I'm using the word man rather than human. It's a personification. In the same way that Uncle Sam is a personification of the US government, man is a personification of humanity. And God, G Earth emoji D, is a personification of reality. It's like reality with a personality, not a person outside reality. So another secular way of saying this is every civilization that was human-centered rather than ecocentric or life-centered destroyed itself. And that's just a fact. We have boatloads of evidence, and I go through the evidence in this program. Tipping points already crossed will be falsely framed as still avoidable. You see it in the media. The IPCC does it. Mainstream media does it. Politicians do it. We're at risk of passing this tipping point. If we're not careful, there's a half a dozen, actually probably a dozen or more. Guy McPherson thinks dozens, plural. They're already in the rearview mirror.
Yes.
We already ran over that dog. It's in the past, except we think, we imagine, we hope that it's in the future. It's not. Abrupt climate mayhem, that is a rapid 4 degrees Celsius or more, locks in biospheric collapse and extinctions. Turns out actually abrupt climate mayhem is a rapid 2 degrees Celsius or more. We're already into abrupt climate mayhem, and it locks in. It guarantees biospheric collapse and extinctions. And we probably are on the list. We don't, all the apex predators. You know, you've got, you know, the plants eat the sunlight. The herbivores eat the plants. The carnivores eat the herbivores. Well, we're an apex predator. We eat everything, but that means we're most vulnerable.
Yeah.
In previous past extinctions, it was the carnivores that were the first to go out because they were most vulnerable. Without assisted migration, love, and action, and I use that instead of activism, love and action. Without assisting in the migration of plants, most plant species will go extinct. Most tree species will go extinct. In fact, there was a major book written that I'll talk about this later, maybe. The Journeys of Trees, a story about forests, people in the future. It features my wife from the very first sentence throughout the book. Without urgent collective action, there will be dozens of nuclear meltdowns. There's 440 nuclear power plants. If we believe that industrial civilization has everlasting life, if we think that the electricity isn't going to go out for whatever reason, if we don't attend with urgency to ensuring as few nuclear meltdowns as possible, we'll have dozens of them. Only indigenous values and lifeways have any chance of passing into the future. This is so vital to understand. I do a whole piece in my program on this. This idea of technology managing nature is absolute insanity. That has no future. Only thou, respectful, reverential, honorable relationship to our living creator, sustainer, and end, that is the biosphere, has any potential for the future. It's what indigenous people call a kin-centric. The world, you know, that we're surrounded by kin, not resources.
Yeah.
As collapse unfolds, confusion, corruption, conflict, and blame grow bigly. And I use bigly. It turns out Donald Trump did not coin bigly. It was used like in the 14th century, but you know, everybody associates it with him. But as collapse unfolds, confusion will grow, corruption will grow, conflict will grow, and blame will grow. This is unstoppable. This is inevitable. If you pull your hair out at that, you're trying to swim against the river of reality. As our biospheric and societal predicament worsens, so will our mental health. We see this in dozens of previous collapsed civilizations and collapsed empires, is that as society continues, addictions of all kinds ramp up. Plato wrote about this 2,500 years ago. Most people will only reluctantly relinquish their faith in the almighty we. The almighty we is the ecocidal belief in omnipotent human agency, that if we all just, and fill in the blank, then we have a chance. No, but most people aren't going to let go of that very easily. They're going to very reluctantly relinquish faith, certainly. And people who consider themselves liberals and progressives are the ones most likely to fall victim to this almighty we, because progressive, the two go together. If you proselytize only the doom side of collapse reality, expect to be shunned. That's why I focus on the post-doom. Unfortunately, you can't get to post-doom without going through doom. So you can't avoid that, but you don't have to wallow in despair and stay there. In fact, fortunately, our brains don't usually allow most of us to do that.
Yeah.
Most people will crave distraction and virtually anything that offers hope. So if you expect people to not be in denial, if you expect people, or like you're frustrated at the people in your life, your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, whatever, that aren't willing to look at collapse square in the eyes, just love them. Stop judging them. Just love them. They're going to cling to anything that offers hope. And number 12, the elite universities, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the mainstream media and politicians, and New York Times bestselling authors will remain first-rate legal hopium dealers.
I love that.
Now, there'll be plenty of hopium on the black market too, but these are the legal options. There'll be no so this is why those of us who really get collapse occasionally put little hooks. Just see if the people in your life that you love are open. That's why I created my two perhaps best video. Actually, I consider this will probably be my best video on this, but I created Collapse in a Nutshell and Overshoot in a Nutshell, both half hour, and they're designed to share with somebody and just say, hey, I'm in a discussion of this kind of stuff. It may not be your cup of tea, but if you're interested, let me know. They'll let you know. They'll either ignore it or they'll say, yeah, let's talk about that, or whatever. So, I'm not going to do more right now, but these are the how I came to this. Paul Chafurka's 5 stages of awakening: dead asleep, awareness of one fundamental problem, awareness of many problems, awareness of the interconnections between the many problems, and awareness that our predicament encompasses all aspects of life. And that's exactly the pattern that I went through. On December 3rd, as I mentioned, 2012, I watched this TEDx talk. It just rocked my world. And then became aware, started studying 20 to 40 hours a week for the last 9 years. That's what I've been doing. And then when I read William Catton's Overshoot in 2015 is when I got that our predicament encompasses all aspects of life. And that's, and really I've spent 9 years and 12,000 hours or more, 12 to 15,000 of hours. And I've put all that stuff freely available, all these different books and stuff, you know, but they're all available on the Post-Doom resources page right here, audio playlists. They're all on SoundCloud, 25 books, 150 articles, papers, and posts. They're all freely available. And there's some really great stuff that I'm not going to bother taking time for now, but anyway, there's lots of stuff there. And I mentioned these 2, if you only watch 2 of my videos, Collapse in a Nutshell and Overshoot in a Nutshell, but I also have more pastoral ones. So these 2 here.
Yeah.
All right, enough said. No, sorry.
Yeah, highly recommend all of that. And your content, Michael, is so rich and you know, whole system, and you know, you could, I mean, if you take those, you know, those 12 inevitables, we could easily do an hour's call on each one of those.
Yes.
So I appreciate that this is just like a quick whiz bang tour.
Yeah, well, I will be recording that tomorrow, and then it'll be Connie will edit it. So within the next 2 or 3 days, it'll be up on YouTube. And I imagine that those 12 inevitables will be the heart of what I do for the foreseeable future, because everything that I can do, the more post-doom, no gloom, more pastoral support, therapeutic kind of stuff, the more prophetic, like this is the nature, I can do all of that within that context. And they're really kind of hard to deny, which is why it helps people to come into that no gloom space of wow, what are the benefits of not being in denial and not thinking that we can fix it all. And just because we can't fix everything doesn't mean there's not a lot of great work that we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. People often, you know, when they come to the Heart community group webinars and things, they associate being collapse aware with giving up, with apathy, with resignation. And it's really not, it's really not that.
No, it's not. In some ways, it's almost the opposite.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to come to some questions, and the rest of you do keep typing your questions. Let me start with you, Jeremy. If you're happy to unmute yourself and go for it, then do that. Jeremy.
I don't know what to say other than my question, which was, are you a hopeful catastrophist?
Yeah, that's actually a good language. I forget who, somebody else does use that language, and I found it.
And there is a history of catastrophism or apocalypticism.
Yeah, I don't like the word hope.
All the way 1,000 years back, where people think the end of the world is nigh. And so that's what worries me about the incredibly eloquent and persuasive and loving and attractive, if I can use that word, sort of feel of your message. But is it just one more apocalyptic end of the world story?
Yeah, great question. So there's a book called Apocalypse Not. Everything you know about Nostradamus, the rapture, and Second Coming of Christ is wrong. It's by John Michael Greer. Little thing, but he takes a look at the 3,200-year history of apocalyptic thinking. Turns out before Zoroaster, before 3,200 years ago, you find very little evidence anywhere of apocalyptic thinking, but you find a lot of evidence in the last 3,200 years. And then there was a Canadian special TV special, 5-part special done on Canadian public television about 7 years ago called Apocalypse When? And it covered the same material, the 3,200-year history of apocalyptic thinking. And there's only one group of people that have a worse track record than those who are prophesying doom. People who've been prophesying doom have been wrong, well, all the time until now. And the only group of people that have a worse track record are those who prophesy utopia, social utopia, technological utopia. The big difference is that we're now in an abrupt climate change regime where we have already passed enough tipping points that are already in the past that will already are rocking us out of the stability that allowed us to grow grain at scale and allowed civilizations to even develop in the first place. Humans were smart enough to develop civilizations prior to 10,000 years ago. It was impossible. The stability of the climate was not there to allow it. And we've now lost that. And so the idea that any mammal larger than something small that can burrow into the ground, any mammal can survive a 4 degrees Celsius or more rise in average global temperature is a faith claim that has no evidence whatsoever. And that's now considered the best case scenario, is that it will only be 4. So that's why I think this kind of, I expect a multi-breadbasket failure where there's only 5 major grain growing regions of the world. And if 2 or more fail in the same year, you're looking at anywhere between 500 million and 4 billion people dying within 14 months. And that's not at all outside the realm of possibility this decade. So I think it's quite possible that there'll be 7,000 pockets 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now. There might be 7,000 pockets or 70,000 pockets of 100 to 200, 300 people in outposts of habitability. But we also could go extinct. I don't think we can know the difference, but we are absolutely looking at the inevitable. We have over 100 examples of previous civilizations that have collapsed. There's no question that Homo colossus, that is industrial humanity, is destined for near-term extinction. That's without doubt. That may or may not mean the extinction of Homo sapiens. We just don't know.
And thank you, Jeremy. And that leads very nicely on to Andy and Evelyn's question. Do you want to go for it?
Well, I think that sort of answered it, really. It's, I think from my personal view, speaking for myself, I still bob about in this denial space where, I just recently heard Roger Hallam speak. He came to Hastings, where we live, to talk about a new campaign. And his view was very strongly that, there is maybe a little chance that we can still do something. And it sparked in me this question of, actually, I don't want to do anything because, sitting on a road or blocking something is really uncomfortable. So might there also be a kind of comfort in this deep adaptation for myself? Because it's easier actually for me now to do nothing and just try and live my life. I feel like I'm in quite a good space with it. But yeah, I think you answered it, Michael, by your stats that you just gave.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, I love Roger. I really do. And I had a fabulous post-Zoom conversation with him. We've interacted a number of times. Roger will go to his dying breath, believing that it's possible to transform. At least maybe there's a 0.5% chance, but by God, it's worth his best energy to do it. And I'm nothing but a deep bow of respect to anybody that comes from that perspective. The last thing I want to do is be discouraging to anybody who wants to make any difference at any scale that they possibly can. I'm just an evidentialist, and I'm looking at what's real in terms of human history, rise and fall of over 100 civilizations, and what we can learn about the ways down, and why never has there ever been in 100, 120, 130 examples, there's never been a society in collapse that's transformed things. Never, for very good, understandable reasons. So that, and also understanding ecological overshoot. The thing that a lot of people don't get, especially progressives and people who are working for systemic transformation, is that most of the things that we're proposing or wanting actually just exacerbate ecological overshoot. As Richard Heinberg says, our fundamental problem isn't climate change. It's ecological overshoot. Global warming is just a symptom of ecological overshoot. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy and Evelyn. Let's come now to Kate. Kate, you had a question about the kind of audience for this, and whether it's, ask the question.
Sure. Pleasure to meet you, Michael. Thank you for everything you're doing, first and foremost. So this is a question really to help us in Heart Community Group as well, of whether you sort of actively promote post-doom to like a broader audience, or are you more letting people come to you who are kind of more awake?
Yeah, great question. Well, not because I've intended to do it, but just by default, what has in fact happened is I haven't done any promoting of it. For example, I've been doing these post-doom conversations for 2 years, and I've been putting resources up on the resource page for 1.5 years. And we just now have had our 24th post-doom, no gloom conversation. And yet Connie and I have an email list of 36,000 people that we haven't even let our email list know about it yet. Now, within the next month, within the next probably 2 or 3 weeks, we will send an email to our list, but I've not actively promoted it yet. I wanted to, this program on the 12, inevitables, I'm going to have a version that's about 15, 20 minutes long. That's just sort of like just the basics, a little more than I shared with you. And then a longer, like an hour long, hour and 10 minute long, that really is the full meal for people who really want to understand the science and with all kinds of charts and all kinds of visual stuff. So I have not yet promoted the post-doom thing beyond just, on my Facebook page. I spend maybe a half hour a week on Facebook, usually just to go up and post something and that sort of thing. But yeah, I will be with this video completed, I will finally be in a place where I'm now willing to let the world know, including my own followers, the people that have been on our list, to know about this. I just, right now it's having 30 people on a post-doom no gloom call. That's really easily manageable. And I know how to relate in a Zoom context and small groups and whatever. If I have 120, I don't know what to do. And so I'm not exactly chomping at the bit for like a bigger thing yet.
Yeah. And just thank you. Thanks, Kate. And do you get the sense that this is so difficult to measure because we're all kind of sitting in our own groups and peer groups, and we tend to kind of hang out with people that, feel the same. But do you get the sense that the number of people who are awake to this is growing, or is it kind of staying stable? Or
no, I think it's growing, and it's growing rather rapidly. Especially, it began growing. At least I can't speak to the UK or any place else in the world, but I can speak to America, the United States, and a little bit to Canada, but mostly here in the United States. And because just in case you all don't know, the way Connie and I have lived our lives for the last 20 years is for 19 years, we traveled North America, living in other people's second homes and vacation homes for a month or 2 or 3 at a time, speaking in churches and colleges and universities and synagogues and whatever within a 2-hour radius. And we've spoken about 3,000 groups across North America, basically where science, inspiration, and sustainability intersect. And so that's what we've been doing for a long time. And I love that, but now we're based here in Ypsilanti, Michigan. We're settled down. We've got a small little place. I still do Zoom sermons and Zoom homilies and, all this kind of, I can do it via Zoom, but it's grounded, it's based here. And I would say that remind me of the question, Kim, I got lost.
No, that's fine. It's really your sense of whether, if I just.
Is it growing?
Yeah.
Yes. So in the United States,
you've seen this before, Michael, but we use these 4 columns, and actually in reality there are 6 columns at least. There's kind of column 0, which is complete denial, and then there's column 5, which is near-term human extinction. But
right.
It was really about, do you sense that because we do, that the percentage of people, it's still very small, but the percentage of people in column 4 is growing.
No question. And I would actually put a column between 4 and what you just described as 5. Beyond collapse aware, it's collapse accepting. Because
Okay.
when you're genuinely collapse accepting, that's when you experience the benefits. There's like 15, 20 benefits. I just had a call. The next post-doom conversation will be somebody I just had a call with 2 days ago on the benefits specifically, because that's what a lot of people miss in discovering, like just how rich it can enhance your life and relationships. Again, assuming you're not struggling to put food on your table for your kids or whatever. But yes, in the United States, the real shift in people becoming aware and open to learning more about collapse and overshoot and you know, potential of extinction, all that kind of stuff, really began with the election of President Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Because the liberals and progressives, had Hillary Clinton won that election, most progressives and liberals would have still been on what I call the secular or the civil religion of perpetual progress.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we had a black president for 2 terms. We got a female president. Gays can get married. Of course, things are progressing without looking at the ecological side of things.
Yeah.
But most progressives and liberals in the United States were in shell shock for the full time that President Trump was in office. And now that Biden is in, they're seeing that that didn't transform things in the way that they had hoped. And so there is and then with the COVID, the whole coronavirus, and then the economic, the chip crisis, and I mean, there's just so many things that allow people, it's kind of hard to imagine that if anybody's paying attention to anything, that they're not feeling collapse, even if they have no intellectual framework for understanding it.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a growing possibility for those of us who are not just a collapse accepting, but not just collapse aware, but collapse accepting, and who have some tools that help take people gently by the hand through a doom, but into a post-doom space. Then, I think that we'll see an exponential rise of people who are not just accepting, but embracing. And I hope so, because if we don't, and this is the thing that scares me, there's very few things that frighten me anymore, because I'm so aware that this is how civilizations collapse. This is how our species is potentially going extinct. But what really frightens me is the fact that we could have dozens or hundreds of nuclear meltdowns. And so we need at least a critical mass of people to be a collapse accepting, to genuinely take the collective political action to ensure that that's not the case. Also, moving trees. I mean, who's going to move trees if you think that, somehow we're going to make this? So there's a cost to denial. There's a cost to believing that we can transform things, because then you're not going to do the things that do come when you accept the reality that, we're part of a terminal, we're part of Homo colossus. And Homo colossus is a terminal cancer.
Absolutely. We talk a lot in our group about the premise that you're starting from, and especially when we talk to local councils and politicians and local leaders and things. And, your entire climate action strategy plans is based on the premise you start with, and if your question is, how do we reach net zero by 2050? That's going to drive everything that you do. So I think it's such an important question. Bill.
Yeah. And I just want to say, before Bill, you ask the question, I just want to say, problems that most people don't understand what is at root of the collapse of the biosphere and the collapse of this civilization. What is at root is human-centeredness. But human-centeredness has taken a particular form, and technology and the market, every market-based economy in the history of our planet, that is every economy, not even our kind of market economy, but every economy that didn't have their economy mimic the wisdom of ecology, but every economy that treats the living world as a place of resources and a place for a waste, always collapses, always does self-destruction. It can't not. So every market economy and every technological society of any kind of technology where it benefits humans, but it doesn't benefit any other creatures, and it doesn't become food for other creatures at the end of its life, always creates more problems for us over time. It just does it over time. So the idea that technology and the market and the Green New Deal and enough wind turbines and solar panels and getting to net zero, it's all delusional ultimately, but it's worse than just bad. it's by having that delusion, we don't move trees, we don't move species, we don't cap the nuclears, we don't get the spent fuel rods out of the swimming pools. So
we don't build local communities.
exactly, we don't build local community that has a chance of being resilient, and where people's love and commitment and compassion and generosity for each other actually add to a quality of life, that your life is better in collapse than it was when we thought we could be just isolated from each other.
Yeah, fantastic.
Sorry, I'm on my soapbox. I apologize.
No, it's great. Bill, unmute yourself and go.
Some of us enjoy that soapbox, Michael.
Thanks, brother.
So this whole COVID drama, you know, my experience with 9/11 was seeing the absolute, you know, lies of mainstream media. And so when COVID came up, it was like 9/11 in slow-mo. And so I've distrusted it profoundly. So given collapse, and given that the powers that be that control all of the media and all of damn near everything, they're not stupid. They know what's going on. They probably know collapse. Is it possible that these 4 billion injections that people have gotten around the planet is designed for another purpose, given the possibility that they know about collapse also?
Yes. Well, certainly. And I read your emails, and I mean, more than that, it's like, I read James Howard Kunstler every Monday and every Friday without exception. I don't agree with him on everything. And certainly if I didn't read him, I wouldn't be aware of what a huge portion of America believes. And some of his prognostications about the future, I not only take with a grain of salt, I sort of take with a salt mine of salt. But I love the guy. I love Jim. I know him. I've interviewed him. And he keeps me aware. And Kennedy's book on Fauci, I mean, there's no question that corruption and evil, for lack of a better word, is happening at powerful levels. You know, what is that old thing? You know, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So there's no question. But I do agree with the statement in the movie Don't Look Up, which is where Jennifer Lawrence's character says, guys, it's worse than that. They're not even as smart enough to be as evil as you're making them out to be. So some of the belief, you know, in the conspiracy side of things, there's no question that the powerful and the elite conspire to have things work on their behalf. No question. And we've got people in our own family. I mean, I've been vaxxed, double vaxxed, and a booster. Connie's not going to get the booster. She had a bad reaction to the second one. I think that some of the stuff out there is quite possibly right. And we've got my daughter, who has my 19-month-old granddaughter, her husband and his whole family have been against vaxxing of any kind for decades. So we've got within our family, and I just bow of respect to the diversity. I'm not interested. I'm not on the liberal side of the anti-vaxxer bullshit, but nor am I on the conservative side that, you know, I mean, I'm not into that blaming and judging. That reality is more complex. The media are bought. Corrupt powers of corporations and powerful individuals are at work. And I don't trust, I mean, to my mind, I typically in the morning, the only place that I trust in terms of the news are aggregate sites like Reddit Collapse, or especially climateandeconomy.com. My favorite collapse site, climateandeconomy.com. Justin Panopticon, that's a pseudonym, but he has like 30 little short paragraphs with a picture of Monday, Wednesday, and Friday economy, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday climate. And you get a world picture of the news that matters, which is our relationship to the planet, our relationship to the future. And so I don't trust the New York Times. I don't trust the Washington Post. I don't trust the Guardian. I don't trust Fox News. I occasionally check Google News just because I want to see what a whole bunch of different sources, but I don't trust, you know, liberals who trash conservatives and conservatives who trash liberals. Neither of them get evolution. Evolution requires a conserving and a progressive element. And so I'm not into that battle at all. I have no dog in most of those fights. But yeah, I agree with you. There's tons of corruption out there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Michael. So we've only got 5 minutes left. Oh no. John Duncan, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so my question is, why should we trust the science that you are bringing us, the science that's informing collapse, rather than the IPCC science?
Because the IPCC, well, first of all, I kind of like the Oracle in the Matrix when she was asked by Morpheus, why should we trust you? I'm not saying you make up your own damn mind. It's like the IPCC is not just the scientists. That's what most people don't realize, is that in order for anything to be published within the IPCC, it has to go through a whole bunch of economists. It has to basically assume the industrial growth model of economics. Nothing can get published there without. And so there are certain things that it's very well known that the IPCC does not factor in, such as most runaway tipping points. The forests of the world are going to continue to burn regardless. If every human being went extinct tonight, the forest fires would get bigger every year, more intense every year, and more of the forests of the world would add, and this is adding carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide. In fact, if we could somehow miraculously stop all emissions tonight, nitrous oxide, methane, and carbon dioxide would continue to rise. It's already out of our control. The oceans, the death of the oceans is already out of our control. Nothing we can do to stop the loss of coral reef and virtually all species other than things like, jellyfish. And I could go on and on. I don't need to. So I say, trust whoever you want to trust. I'm not saying that you should trust me, but what you should know is that there are certain things that the IPCC regularly cannot possibly factor into their models. And somebody who's an IPCC reviewer that is the first person to say this is Peter Carter. I have 6 different things that I recommend, the highest things on abrupt runaway climate mayhem. And it's on the resource page of the Post-Doom website. And you can click. And I've got Guy McPherson, I've got Paul Beckwith, I've got just like a who's who of the best stuff on abrupt climate change. And the IPCC isn't reporting on any of those for very good, understandable reasons. I'm not making the IPCC wrong. It's just that's the way it's set up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have Jeremy and we have Anne and Neil, and we're running out of time. Jeremy, were you going to come back with something?
You're on mute. You're on mute.
This is true. It's in a way the same point that John's just made. Because listening to you, you seem to me to be rubbishing any attempts at moving towards sustainable energy production. You say it's all a waste of time. It's all far too late. It's all a kind of liberal conspiracy.
No, I didn't say that one, but I did agree with the first two.
I think you did, actually. And I feel that you are, in a way, saying exactly the same as a climate denier, which is, it's a waste of, the climate denier says, climate change denier just says, well, it's not happening. You're saying it's a complete catastrophe and therefore it's not worth doing anything, except this kind of spiritual path that you're leading us down.
Yeah.
Okay, because of the time, Jeremy, I'm going to suggest. No. I'm going to recommend that you go and watch some of the fuller programs.
Well, it's just specifically Collapse in a Nutshell and Overshoot in a Nutshell.
Yeah.
They're each. I cite all of the scientific evidence. I cite which papers and books and stuff. And if there were only one book that I would recommend, like if you only read one more book the rest of your life.
I read papers, not books.
Well, William Catton's book, Overshoot, many people consider the most important book of the 20th century.
Books are polemic. Papers are scientific evidence.
There's a reason that most of us consider it the most important book of the 20th century. So feel free to just watch my video if you want to, Overshoot in a Nutshell. But yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. And who else had their hand up? Anybody else want to go real quick? Otherwise, we're going to have to.
Neil. No?
Yeah, Neil. Neil and Anne, are you still there?
First of all, Michael, thanks for all your work. Love it. And in answer to Jeremy and this collective, Michael hasn't said don't act. Michael has said act.
Yeah, the opposite, actually.
Post-doom perspective. And so with respect, that doesn't take away from the potential to create islands of sanity in this sea of destruction. And so community development, mechanisms for actually creating coherence. And I know we've run out of time and it's a longer design question, but my sense is that in the same way we need a critical mass to shut down nuclear reactors and move trees,
Yes.
we also need critical masses in geographical places that can act together
Yes.
to lessen the impacts in the short term and to lengthen the glide, even though we know what's coming. So it's not inevitable, the timing, and therefore anything we do now is actually a benefit, provided it's done with a loving life intention and a loving design.
Yes, thank you, Neil. And I apologize, Jeremy, for reacting defensively. The reason I did is because I'm pretty much saying the opposite of what you were suggesting that I was saying. I believe that there's tremendous work we can do, but most of this work that I think can make the biggest difference is going to be locally and regionally. And so, but yes, the ecological paradigm that William Catton offers, and the understanding of energy return on energy invested, that's where I think that some of the large scale things that many levels of progressives want is not aligned with reality. But yeah, feel free to believe differently.
Yeah. Whew. Wow, what a great call. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Michael, so much. We could, you know, Michael, I'm tempted to ask you now, and you can only say no. Maybe, you know, we could do this again in a few months.
Oh, are you kidding me? I'd love to. And one of the things that would be really fun is that, you know, is actually, if any of your folks want to watch Collapse in a Nutshell or Overshoot in a Nutshell, or this new one when it's done, and then actually come and let's just spend the time discussing it. Because that way I don't try to, I'm not trying to cram a bunch of information into a short period of time.
Yeah. No, that would be great. Thank you so much.
And I just want to say publicly, Kim, your work, the work that you are doing, both in this context, but also just, you're one of the people that I count as a cherished colleague in this post-doom heart and mind space. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I appreciate your, gosh, I mean, you know, just the skill at being able to impart so much information in such a short time. And I know you've got so much more up your sleeve. But thank you, everybody, for coming.
Well, and feel free to join us everyone, you know, again, on the discussion page of the Post-Doom website, twice a week, we have these Post-Doom No Gloom calls.
They're great.
And I'd love to have you, Kim, as a guest, where you there fielding questions. Same thing with you, Bill. I deeply bow of honor and respect to you as an older brother in this work. So I'd love to have either one of you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming along. And depending on what time it is for you, enjoy the rest of your day or the rest of your evening.
Yes.
And we will post this on the various groups. I'll share it with you as well, Michael. Thank you, and lots of love to all of you.
Thank you, Kim. Yep. Bye-bye.